I don't really think joy and sorrow is a very fitting name. I don't think I feel those emotions when playing this chapter. But I guess I'm more ambivalent than anything, and that probably doesn't make a good chapter title. Chapter 4. Actually, I do like this chapter. I just don't know if I'd say I'm joyful about it. Pirates and Vikings aren't the same things, game. Excuse me. That's an important distinction. Got that wrong. Excuse me, Marth. Are you insulting my good hair? Marth, you passive-aggressive fuck. Oh, apparently Marth doesn't have a taste in good hair. Anyway, how's everyone? Okay, Rhodey found a bad sword. Good for you, Rhodey. More points with Ryan. Katria, that's the laundry pole. Why did you pick that up? Katria, somebody needed that. Katria, no. Alright, and Cord gets 27 experience. Oh, didn't get an extra one. What did Luke get? Luke got Sleet. It's a really bad magic tome. It's a very underpowered version of the Blizzard tome. I think it's got a lot of durability, and that's just it. Ooh, and we get one of my favorite conversations. So this one might seem a little bit familiar if you've played Awakening. Awakening does actually have a fair few similarities to this game in terms of like its supports between the Lord and the Avatar. This one doesn't play out quite the same though. And here we go. However, I was just thinking whether or not it would be fine to show you my naked body. Marth-senpai! Alright, what do we got next? Ooh, conversation with Cecil. This one's okay. I'm not a huge fan of it or anything, but if we've got enough points between Cecil and Iris, that means another conversation's coming up. That's one I don't like at all. And in fact, while I haven't seen all of them in the game, the support conversations that is, that one's my least favorite. This one, though, is just a little weird. Because the entire thing is Cecil, who is usually really brave and fearless, and those were just synonyms, is afraid of ghosts. Which, you know, fair enough. She gets spooked. Look, Cecil, if you don't want to see ghosts, just stay away from the Dragon's Gate. A lot of those things come out of there. Nowadays especially, you can't go 5 steps without a ghost. Fucking put an amiibo on your 3DS, ghost pops out. Can't escape them. Or, you know, we could have confronted him twice as hard. And by twice as hard, I mean Minerva could have taken his head off with an axe. I mean, granted, that'd probably be an act of war, but it's worth it if Lang dies. That guy's a dick and I hate him. You might have noticed by this point, but Lang, bit of a dick. I don't know if the story has made that come across quite well. I don't know if it's portrayed that correctly. Alright, so here's the map. We've got a thief over here. Kill him immediately because he is in range of that town. He will burn it to the ground. We've got a lot of desert tiles as well. We've got this guy named Guile. And we have, this mysterious paladin over here. I don't know why, but I just get this feeling that he is in a simultaneous state of hot and idiot. So I guess let's talk about him now. I don't know. I feel like he's extremely mysterious. He might even be using a fake name. Perhaps two, just to cover his tracks. Yeah, that's usually how it works, Jagan. You see a hot guy, he's your ally now. Alright, so here's the worst one. I hate the support conversation. It sucks, and it's bad. Are you ready for the worst after-school special you've ever seen? Because we're gonna learn about gender equality. But first, we just have to see Cecil acting really unreasonable. But anyway, yeah, I hate the support conversation. I'm not really gonna let it play out normally. I'm just gonna talk about how much I hate it. The later parts are so bad it makes Mulan seem subtle. Oh man, that woman Cecil, she sure is unreasonable about Rhodey doing a nice thing. And then Rhodey uses the word affection, and for some reason that doesn't come across well at all, and I don't know why Rhodey wouldn't know that. I don't know. You'd think Rhodey would have read the dictionary at least 3 times and memorized all the words. I feel like you should have seen that one coming, Rhodey, come on. Anyway, yeah, that conversation sucks. Let's go to the chapter. Well, why'd you come here, Ogma? Wait, why do you live here, Wendell? I don't know, personally I think you should have just climbed the mountain instead. Just climb the mountain and everything will be okay. Oh wait, no, never mind, there's Guardian. Back the fuck off. Take a different route. I mean, Ogma's also here. He's pretty good. Hey, Ogma's got a big sword. You can see it from the map. It's huge. So anyway, yeah, there's this couple of children. They're arguing. Yumina's a bit of a jerk. Alright, so before we talk about them, let's have Ogma talk to this mysterious paladin who I don't recognize at all. Though I must say, the high collar and cravat are very stylish, but also very not familiar at all. Never seen someone with one of those. Oh wait, of course I have, Macallus, the other person with a high collar. This must be Macallus in disguise. Also, while I did miss it, I do like how this conversation starts with Ogma being like, "Who are you?" Oh, you're not with them. Oh, sorry, I just thought you were red on the field, so yeah, I thought you were an enemy. My mistake. Sorry about that. It's just like in the middle of the battlefield, you have this relatively casual conversation and this small mix-up. It's so good. So, the Sirius person seems to care for the Grustian children for some reason. I mean, in fairness, it makes sense. You don't want to watch children being murdered by Vikings. Certainly there's no sort of personal connection there. I don't know, like you were some sort of Knights of Grust or something? Nah. That would just be silly. It just makes sense that as a man like Sirius here, who I know very well, it's like we're best pals already and we just met him. Of course he'd care for these children. Anyway, now we can talk about new characters. As per usual, Ogma's a pretty good all-around unit. He also has better availability than you might think. Considering you can get him in the prologue, you do have a small chance to get him up a few levels before this point, and even then, Chapter 4 as availability goes is still really good. And while you might have plenty of sword units by now, he is your first mercenary. Unless, of course, you chose your avatar to be a mercenary, but whatever, let's not get into that. Ogma, of course, has some good growth rates and some not too bad base stats. His luck's a little lackluster, but at the same time, his growth rate's good enough where that shouldn't matter too much. Of course, Ogma's got pretty much everything he needs. He's got a high starting weapon level, fantastic HP considering he's going to get HP every level up, and some good strength, skill, and speed. He's going to be very powerful in pretty much any situation unless you get really unlucky. His defense isn't fantastic, but his starting defense is good enough where it shouldn't be the biggest issue, unless you're trying to attack some pretty hefty guys. Yumina's a bit of an odd healer, in that she's not going to be as good as Militia even at the start, and she doesn't really get amazing unless Militia gets really unlucky. Of course, while Yumina's magic rate starts kinda bad, gets slightly better upon promotion, but even then, she's not as good with magic as Militia. If anything, she's got survivability in that she does have some pretty high speed, luck, and resistance. So if you want a mage that's a little bit harder to kill, Yumina's for you. And I mean, I've mentioned it before, but healers generally don't need as high a magic provided you're just sticking to healing. While Yumina's not going to have as much damage potential as Militia, again unless Militia gets unlucky, it's not like she necessarily needs it. And of course that C rank in staves also helps, as it always does. Okay, so Ubello is straight up really not that good. His base stats are horrible. With a 1 in both magic and skill, Ubello's gonna have a hard time doing damage to pretty much anything, so he's pretty much the biggest pain in the ass to train. In addition, his growth rates are good across the board. By which I mean they're all fairly even, not that they're necessarily good. Most of his growth rates are around 50%, with the exception of his defense and resistance. While a 20 in both defense and resistance is respectable, considering most characters, the rest really aren't that good. Being around 50% means that Ubello is absolutely an RNG character. He might end up pretty good if those 50% end up being positive, but if you don't get lucky, a lot of his stats are going to turn out very crappy. And of course, that 40% in skill really does not help his situation. You can attempt to use Ubello if you want, but you already have a better mage even without class change, and you're going to get better mages even without class change. I really don't see much of a reason to use Ubello. Unless you really like gambling. Okay, so for a pre-promoted unit, Sirius is actually incredibly good. His base stats are all pretty solid, and his growth rates are also really good. He's got a fair few 60s, and his HP is going to be fantastic. And man, that defense? 50% isn't something you see a lot unless you're dealing with knights. He also has fantastic weapon levels, having an A in lances and a B in swords, meaning he's going to be able to use anything you have at the moment. And you know what the best part is? He starts at level 1, so while he might be a paladin, he's still got plenty of room to grow. Of course, the only drawback is it's going to be a while before he earns a lot of experience at a time. He will be stealing a lot, so it can be hard to gauge when you actually want to start using Sirius, In terms of, efficiency, it's certainly not a skill I've ever picked up. I don't really know when the exact point pre-promote becomes useful in each game, but even still, Sirius is a good unit, so provided you use him, fairly frequently, especially towards endgame, he's gonna turn out really well. Okay, so, Sirius and Ogma are going to be the main defense here at the moment. Ogma's going to back off and take care of the thief over there if somebody else doesn't get there in time. For now, we're going to have Ubello protect the village. And Yumina does have that rescue staff, which is going to be very useful. We want to get Marth over here as soon as possible. However, he does have to save that first village first, so Yeah, we're gonna have him do that. Thankfully, though, Rhodey's going to kill that guy quickly enough. Not the best level, but hey, it's an extra point of speed. He does need that. Yeah, I noticed it. I did point it out, but I didn't specifically get what it actually does. But yeah, remember how in Shadow Dragon we had the Warp Staff fairly early on in the game, and that was one of the most useful stabs strategy-wise. Not to say Rescue and Warp are, never useful outside of whatever game gives you to them for basically free, because, I believe Rescue was in Shadow Dragon, and of course it is useful, but because the game just gives it to you, you kind of think about it more, or at least that's how I usually react to something like that. When the game gives it to you for free, I keep it in my head for strategies. Anyway, though, yeah, the point is, the rescue staff in this game is incredibly important. I believe you get more than just this one, but I wouldn't use it willy-nilly, because of course it has 5 uses. And while there are more in the game, it's kinda integral to at least a few strategies. Of course, first one is in this chapter because while the children and Ogma and Sirius aren't in huge danger, I would prefer to get Marth over to that village as soon as possible, and because he's going to this village over here, he's gonna take a while to catch up if you don't use the rescue staff, so use the rescue staff. That's the moral of the story. Use it, come on. The game gives it to you for free. Oh, and we get Shaver, which I mentioned in the DLC, is wind magic that even women can use. So, yeah, it's gonna be pretty useful when we see more flyers. We're gonna warp Marth over here, but of course he's not gonna be here in time to prevent Ubello from getting hit. Ubello, of course, really isn't that good. I probably mentioned this in the character bios, and in fact I'm pretty sure I would, because if I'm going to mention it anywhere, it's going to be there, but Ubello's not that good. He's kind of a little bit RNG based. His growth rates are pretty even across the board, meaning none of them are particularly high, and therefore you're at the mercy of RNG at that point. Alright, so honestly this chapter really isn't too bad. I can't say that there's any, major strategy I'd have to mention other than, just, get Marth over to the other group ASAP. That guy had the Devil Sword. The Devil Sword, like the Devil Axe that Dart had. Oh, and Yumina took the hit because that thief is smart. He'd prefer to do some damage over burning down a village that he couldn't burn down this round. Anyway, though, yeah, Devil Sword does a lot of damage, but if your luck's too low, there's a chance that you're going to be hit by the weapon itself. Of course, even with high luck, you might accidentally do that. So I would never really recommend the Devil weapons unless you really like playing with Fates. Anyway, though, here's Castor. So Castor was actually my archer in Shadow Dragon, just because you still get him fairly early on, and as a hunter, he has good availability and better stats than, well, Gordon has better availability in that game, but not by enough to really make it count. Even in this game, honestly, Castor doesn't have terrible availability, and it's really just the prologue that makes Castor a little less worth using. Just because, again, Ryan is amazing, except for that one time, but my computer died, and that LP doesn't exist anymore, sort of. In a few more parts it won't. So, yeah, it doesn't matter in the long run. Ryan definitely never turned out poorly. So anyway, yeah, Castor's back. Let's talk about him. While you do have plenty of options for archers, Castor still remains a pretty solid choice. Of course, with the prologue making Ryan amazing, and the remake making Warren a much more viable choice, Castor's not quite as clear-cut an archer as he was originally, but nonetheless he still has pretty solid stats, good growth rates, and a C rank in bows, so he's not a bad choice. And of course he does come with that killer bow, which, hey, even if you're not going to use Caster, not a bad idea to steal that from him. Alright, Caster's been talked about, let's move forward then. So yeah, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Ryan's gonna be my go-to archer, which is too bad, because I like Caster alright. I don't know why he's the only Irish person on the entire planet, but there you go. There he is, it's him. He's Irish for some reason, and I don't know why. Ah, and we mentioned these star shards. Oh, we got a star shard in the last chapter, didn't we? Shit, I completely forgot about that. So, yeah, the star shards, those actually work a bit differently between the original version of this game and this one. In the original game, star shards actually changed your growth rates. I believe they have similar stat ups, like if a star shard in this game gives you strength, the original game it probably gave you a strength growth rate. So, yeah, it was actually a pretty interesting item in that regard. It is an interesting strategy, but there are reasons that I'm kinda glad it's just a stat boost now. I mean, first things first, I believe most of the growth rates in this game are just flat out better than the original, because a lot of stat growth rates in the original are just flat out bad. Especially for certain characters like the Paladins. They just did not, well, the Jagan type characters. Jagans back in the day had 10% growth rate, so if you thought they were bad now, hoo boy. Anyway, there's the required boss talking about the enemy reinforcements early on in the game. You don't get that much of a warning later on in the game, and honestly, even with a warning, I still don't like enemy reinforcements moving first on harder modes, which is, wow, that's a good level, which is why I don't have that on here. That being said, though, yeah, early on you do get warnings at the very least. It still doesn't tell you what type of enemies are out, and it doesn't really let you get into a good position before it happens. Like, right here, Yumina would have been dead, unless I, like, surrounded the castle. So, yeah, that's why I don't really like reinforcements. Even if you know they're coming, if they move immediately, it's hard to strategize around them, and I don't think it's ever a particularly good idea for that to happen at the beginning of the turn. Anyway, though, yeah, Star Shards in this game just give a stat boost. I forget which one we got last time. Was it Taurus? Anyway, though, yeah, I did have a list as to who the Star Shards went to, so you're gonna see the same characters with the same Star Shards for the most part, except I do have a few that are shared between characters who, you know, are only sometimes on the roster. Let's see, other than that, as I said before, strategy in this chapter really isn't too bad. You might also notice the desert tiles, I did mention those before, and I do actually like their introduction here. Desert tiles will very much slow down your units with the exception of mages, and of course flyers, since they're not affected by the ground they fly over. So of course they're not slowed down. Mages dress lightly, so that's why they're able to get across sands very easily. But that being said, while desert tiles are normally annoying, it's very easy to go around them in this chapter, so it's not a huge deal. Later desert chapters, of course, are a huge pain in the ass, because desert chapters usually are. Honestly, not really huge on them that much, unless they're used well enough to be, like, sort of the obstacle you want to avoid, but, like, it's not as necessary to cross them. Maps that are just desert are always a huge pain in the ass, but I thought Echoes did it fairly well, kind of. The desert defense missions kinda sucked because those generally required you to go out into the sands, but the ones where you approach the fort were kinda neat. I like how they give your enemy the advantage, but they were sort of set up so it didn't feel terrible to have the disadvantage, usually. Of course, desert tiles always suck, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt, but I didn't think it was the worst thing on the planet most of the time. Keywords, keywords. The only worse maps in Fire Emblem are pretty much rain or snow chapters, and thank God those are not in that many games. I mean, I also hate Fog of War, to be fair, but anything that limits your movement, they generally end up being super fucking tedious, which again is why I like the Fortress missions and Echoes, because it's not that the entire thing is deserts, it's just most of it is. The goal is to get out of the deserts. Anyway, that was Guile. He's actually a surprisingly tough boss, but not enough defense to keep him alive for more than one turn to allow him to use any sort of long-range weapons. And hey, Seda, how's it going? I'm sure she's here with good news, right? You just missed Marth, and fucking goddammit. Again? Oh my god, 2 games in a row you lose your kingdom, Marth. Altia is captured. Again. I can't believe we fucked up twice. Who loses their kingdom twice, Marth? What the hell? Yeah, it's like everyone was preparing for it. Including Hardin himself. Wow, this is like the most elaborate trap. Come on, Jagan, we're besties. Hardin would never do this to me. Again? For crying out loud, Elite. Seda's on a Pegasus! Why did you need to self-sacrifice this time? Don't cry, I understand. My sister sacrifices herself a lot. You should see her at the grocery store. Ah, man, there's no good lines here. Don't worry, Martha, I'll sacrifice myself. How? In this situation? How are you going to self-sacrifice? Are you going to wait in line before we even finish? Is that what you're planning? I don't know. You just do this too frequently, Elise. Come on. Oh, yep, and yet again, the hairstyle change was inopportune. We just lost your homeland, but do you want to grow your hair out again? Yep, and of course there's going to be hats for other days, so we're going to change it back. Okay, just because I'm changing it back doesn't mean I didn't like it. Stop being judgy.